Welcome to the Vethen Law Firm Video Educational Series. My name is Charles Vethen.
My name is David Gans.
And we're here with
James Cotter.
So James, thank you very much for joining us today for this session. And we'd like to start off by getting a little bit of information about you. What's your background in real estate and the construction and leasing areas?
Okay, my family's done commercial real estate for the last 50 years. My family owns properties in 6 states, over 3.5 million feet of office buildings, farms, nursing homes, shopping centers, just a little bit of everything in commercial real estate. I've been involved as the vice president for Cotter & Sons for the last 4 years, where I assisted my father in all sorts of lease negotiations to negotiating mortgage loans for all of our various properties and entities, and as well as just been in the day-to-day process every day.
And our session today, David, is focusing more on what both landlords and tenants look for in a commercial lease, and we'll also discuss what we should look for in a commercial real estate loan. And David, what are some of the things that some of our clients would like to hear about a commercial lease?
I think in tenants, when tenants come to us, they really want to know what they can negotiate. And one of the things that you mentioned was lease negotiation. Some of the things feel so locked in place and so concrete. What are some of the things that landlords are willing to negotiate with tenants about?
There's a couple items that we typically negotiate with our tenants, most importantly being the rental rate for the building. From the landlord's perspective, there's a lot that's involved in that. Usually it's the term of the lease, how long the tenant is looking at staying at the location, the credit worthiness of the tenant, and lastly, what type of tenant improvements we're looking at doing at any of the properties. So, from our perspective, the better that the tenant is willing to work with us, usually we give a lot more leeway to the tenant. So less tenant improvements, we can be more flexible with the rental rate.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about tenant improvements.
Sure.
Coming into a brand new building such as this one, tenants are going to want to make the space their own if you as a landlord have a space like that. Who normally pays for the improvements?
If it's a brand new shell space, such as this one, I would think that you'd expect the landlord to pay for a majority of those improvements, since there's nothing in the space currently. And that's more of an office scenario. If we were looking at a shopping center, it's very normal to have retail tenants such as Starbucks want to do their own infill on that retail space. So it's very normal for us to give them a shell space such as this one, where they would do all the improvements on their own. So really it changes by category of commercial buildings and what the norms are in those areas.
Let me ask you a quick question on that. So David talked about how you can negotiate the tenant improvement side.
Sure.
So when a tenant comes into one of your buildings, and let's say they're not a huge tenant, they're not a Starbucks, but they're a small CPA firm, a financial planning firm, something like that, and they want a nice entrance, entryway, conference area, and the standard offices, right? So when the negotiation starts, as to the tenant improvements, is the landlord paying a check so the tenant can find a contractor, or is the landlord doing the build out themselves?
And that's also part of the negotiating process. From our perspective, we have a considerable amount of office space. We have staff that actually help with our construction in our company, and we see some pretty considerable discounts in doing that. But a smaller landlord wouldn't have those that scale, I guess. And so he would probably want to find somebody that's outsourced to do that construction work. So being that it's outsourced, what difference does it make if the tenant finds his own contractor or the landlord, as long as the work is getting done? And so usually you have things that are tied into that lease negotiating, whether that be the maximums for the construction contract and how much the landlord is willing to pay, or the tenant, and then also ensuring that certificate of occupancy is achieved, either from the landlord side if he's doing the construction, or the tenant side, to ensure that all of the codes have been met and that it's been done in a first-rate condition.
All right.